before we hand it over to Vic Mankotia, who will be leading the session, we have a short video to play.
What happens when a thing becomes more than a thing? For instance, this phone is not a phone anymore. It's information, connection, commerce. It's 82 billion apps downloaded each year. It's billions of people and systems and things. It's the future of everything. This isn't a phone anymore. It's your business, and it's being rewritten by software.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to welcome Vic Mankotia, Vice President for Security and API Management, APJ, CA Technologies.
Good afternoon. So that video was to reset you from all you've been watching all day. You've heard about agility, you've heard about how CA is innovating across application development. I think all these sessions would have been extremely interesting. You enjoyed the whole afternoon. But now we come to the main session. This is what I call the final show for the day. And I'm going to talk about security. I'm going to have a guest come and talk with me about API management. I have a very good story for you. But before I begin any of these, I always make sure most of you have had some conversation of some sort with me. And we've spoken about the security that CA delivers and secures its customers with. You've also heard the industry talk about how security is changing. I'm going to take you through a few slides to illustrate why we are different, why we are enablers, why we are leaders, and where we lead what we do. So first and for all, you heard about digital transformations. You heard about the journey that many clients are going through. Maybe from a desktop to a tablet to a phone which is smart, or even a device in your home which provides entertainment. It's digital transformation. Digital transformation is across the board, every industry. We'll talk a little bit more about it later. I'll talk about security now. With me today will be Trent Mayberry. Trent is the general manager for Accenture Digital, based out of here in Singapore, and runs a geography-wide role. He and I will talk about our experiences with API management and across the board, what we are seeing in this geography, Asia Pacific and Japan, how customers, how partners, how businesses are evolving, how the businesses are changing from what they used to be and competing with the new businesses and the new models coming out today. I'm going to talk about security in the modern era. So if you go back, and if many of you have a memory, being 24 years in the industry, it used to be about data, information, patents, all housed in a firewall, behind a firewall, covered by IPS, IDS, network security, parameter security. And that's the way we functioned, because information inside the building or behind the DMZ was secure, and anything outside was not secure. It was about where security began and where security ended. What's happened today, last 3 years, 5 years, yesterday, is that moat, that wall, that fortress has disappeared. Today, security is where the people are. Many of us have more than one device. You have a device at home, you have a device in the car, You have a device in your pocket, you have a device at work, you maybe have a device called a tablet. Same device can be used with different personas. You do social media on one, you do corporate entries on the other, you do leisure or entertainment on the third. But the one thing which stays with every device is the identity. And hence I'm going to elaborate and expand on what CA does from an identity perspective and then show you the entire portfolio and how identity is going to be key to how we thrive, not just survive, but thrive in this digital world. And it's not only about business, it's about how we work and play in a connected world. That connected world of ours has identity as the perimeter. And the confidence in that world has to be raised for people to have a level of trust to work and play. That's the security we are in. So it's not about anti-this or anti-that. It's more about the right people identity, the right access on that identity, given to only the right people on the right device. I'll talk more about that. I'll cover off two acquisitions we made quickly. We acquired a company in the Washington, D.C. area called Accenture. This company gave us the ability to bring privileged access management for privileged users in an organization. It is in a software format, it's in a hardware format, it's in a virtual format. It competes with not many, but very unique offerings in the market. It is world-class leader in its space, and concurrently, the scalability and the usage is extremely high. So privileged identity management, privileged access management is what Accenture got to us. Number two, we had identity and we had governance. And these two things go hand in glove. Why? Because the right identities need to play to the right regulations and the right governance in any company. We had them on two different platforms, on two different user interfaces, and there was no correlation. We acquired a company called IDM Logic, again a privately held company in the New Jersey area, and this gives us a modern UI, a one pane of glass looking at identity and governance on the same platform for customers who want to manage both. So those are the two new acquisitions. I think you as the media and the press would like to hear about that, how we complete our suite and enhance our offerings. I will cover off another acquisition, which is in the API space. We bought a small technology, which is an API created. The gentleman right here was asking a question about how do you create APIs. We actually have a software solution which helps companies create APIs, API creation. And that leads into the response you got from my colleagues earlier. So that's another acquisition which I haven't really got a slide on, but that was a third acquisition which was made, again, in the same space. Let me go into this, and I think I spoke about breaches, I spoke about identity, and there are two kinds of companies you will know today. One, which have been breached. The others, which could get breached. It's not a question of we are in a glass house and we're not going to be affected. I think every company, every piece of information, every database, and it's not so much about databases or storage anymore, because over 90% of the information which is created is unstructured. The structured information is easy to manage because we know where it is and we know how to manage it. But the generation of today is not only consuming, I'm consuming information, but the generation which comes into the workforce today is creating a lot of information on a mobile platform, and that's unstructured data. How do you manage that? That comes back to managing identities, managing access, and I'll get a bit more into it. And that basically refers to a security of the new era. Now, I go back to security of the last decade, where people would come with a malicious code which has gone through their system and they want cleansed, remediated, and back up and running. The alert, protect, response, and manage timeline is to run. You don't want to fall below and go into DR and recreate. That has led to building. Because now, I cannot sell you security after a breach has taken place, no matter what software I have. And people want to have business continuity, they want to make sure they're not compromised. And it begins by protecting identities and allowing the right access. If you are going to do any malicious activity into an organization, the first people you will try to target as a hacker would be privileged users, people who have access to many other users, who have rights, who have more provisions, and they can then lead you into an organization. So the mindset of protecting the identities of privileged users is paramount. And I always begin with a statement and normally cite somewhere, every piece of information we create is not equally secure. Some information needs more security, others less. The same goes with people, roles, the compliance they do, the responsibilities they have, and how people move between organizations. Today, nobody works for one company. You're a contractor, you work for another company, you're shared. People go in and out of organizations. The airline buys fuel from an oil company, the oil company then banks with another company. It is all a connected world where confidence has to rise and identities are right at the center. Stopping breaches, protecting identities, and at the same time making businesses empowered enough to change, adapt to this world is extremely important. That's what SIGA does. I'll quickly highlight the various offerings we have. I don't want to go in depth with the offerings. That's one slide which represents what we do. We do identity management, advanced authentication, risk-based authentication, for payment systems, for loyalty programs. We do analytics on identity. We then manage privileged access. We make sure there's a single sign-on federated through a CA directory system which takes you all the way through. The one thing I noticed 6 years ago when I came to CA was I did not have 18 passwords. I did not have to jot down 22 different usernames. The one identity takes you across federated systems which are allowed by a corporation or organization like ours. Access management. How does the right person get only the right access to the right information, only on the right device? And then we'll talk about mobile access gateways, the API management side, and the API gateway side of the business. These are slides talking about simplified deployment, how applications need to have user experiences which are modern, easy to use, because the complexity of large screens and powerful devices is not required with modern day era applications. They are complex and composite, they have APIs connecting into them, but they don't need to be elaborate. And advanced security, which gives you insight, controls, and management. Summarizing that, you come to identity management, privileged access and authentication, as well as single sign-on, which is federated. These are the key offerings we bring to market with large customers. Now, naturally, the media wants to know customers' names. The business of security is a harsh business. Everybody wants a reference, nobody wants to be a reference. So I'll talk about some examples. The largest identity management project any nation in the world has is in the back of the software we provide. The largest postal departments across the world, the systems we have. Largest banks, automobiles are secured in the manufacturing process of the APIs. The whole access and authentication risk management on credit card systems runs at the backbone of 3D Secure ICA technology. Various acquisitions of ours have fueled these, which give us this power, not only to talk about how we integrate across it, but also how we scale up. The two strengths SIA has in our security suite, it's proactive and it's scalable as well as integrating each other. So you integrate across scalable systems as well as on heterogeneous platforms, no hardware agenda, And that's the power of CA as well as the security suite. So let me get into the open enterprise. No enterprise has been segregated on an island, cut away with the networking, and secluded. Every enterprise, every organization is either connected to the cloud, or to a mobile device, or to social media. The moment you connect them, you have what we call an open enterprise. How do you secure that open enterprise? By providing the right people with the right access, the right information on the right device. That is the only proactive way you're going to get there. Now, some will say I'm delusional, I'm too positive in my thinking, and breaches will happen. Yes, they will. There's nothing which is going to be ever secure. That's why you complement this with infrastructure security, with the anti-this and the firewall that, and the IPS this and the APJ that. To enable business in this world, we're also looking at applications which are composite, which are powered by APIs. Trent, I've kept you sitting there for some time. I'm getting into the API flow of things. If you want to join me on stage, I'm going to get a couple of chairs and we'll have a short chat to Trent. Once we get the chairs, I'm going to walk you through the API. This is the legacy before the API architecture came to play. You would have people thinking of a better way forward. There was a better way. There were building blocks to composite applications, which created a journey towards digital transformation. Today you look at applications which tell you the weather forecast, the news, stock markets, currencies, email. They all are composite applications helping us do our business every morning. Every morning each of us is waking up to an application or applications, and that digital business runs every day. Having said that, before this you had web pages, and Trent, it's yours and mine now. You had web pages pulled from what were made for desktops, pulled into handhelds, and soon people started developing mobile applications, mobile web pages, mobile search engines, to a world today where we are seeing more searches done on a mobile platform than we had searches done on desktops or otherwise other platforms. Trent, Mayberry, welcome to the fireside chat without the fire.
Thanks, Vic.
I think it's what I call the coldest country in the world. We've been chilled down here, but thank you for coming, thank you for spending your time. Trent, as I introduced earlier, is from Accenture Digital. Do you want to introduce yourself and give us a bit of a color context, sir?
Yeah, so thanks for having me come out and have a conversation. I'm responsible for digital within Accenture, and it's quite a funny comment because the first question I usually ask when I talk to clients is what is digital? And they often talk about the snack stack, SDMAC, so social, mobile, analytics, cloud. I usually add an extra A, so it's SMAAC because of APIs. To me, APIs powers a lot of that. And when Vic talks about the mobile revolution, a lot of the mobile apps need to consume services in the back end, so they need to use the APIs to do that. And more we're seeing companies shift from a mobile-first construct to an API-centric solution set, and we'll talk a little bit about that industry by industry.
No, thank you for leading that API conversation through, because we may talk about security, and I did cover that. However, the future of the industry, and especially on our side of the business, when you're talking about composite applications and the transformation happening, it's happening across every sector. People are collecting data like there's no tomorrow. Repositories are growing, and people are then going, what do we do with all that data? What are you seeing out there? Are people trying to divulge into that data and see how they can build applications or architectures, what we knew as services-oriented architecture? Is that still in play, or is it a shift today?
I think the challenge with most organizations is they are hungry for data to make good decisions. And they've been isolated a little bit with only having data available from their own internal systems. And now we're in a position where we can actually measure everything, including the interactions with your business partners. So there's almost this data exhaust that is overwhelming for a lot of organizations. I spoke to Chinese CIOs And I asked the question, do you have enough data to make good decisions? And their answer was no. I said, if I give you more data, will you make better decisions? No. Why not? Because it's actually about what it means. How do I translate it? And the nice thing about having this data is if you can put the power of analytics behind it, you can understand what it means and make much more scientific decisions.
I totally agree. At the same time, I have seen, and I've got a couple of slides, I go to retail and I see supermarkets changing the way people shop. And we were talking about it a few days ago. And then I go into a transportation organization and I see the connected car is changing, and we do a lot of business with a lot of companies building cars in our part of the geography. And then I'll go and see logistics companies, how they're evolving and changing. Now, I've got a few more, and I could keep talking about healthcare and banking and the rest. But I want to hand the clicker back to you so that you can wind it left to right, either way. But are these the same trends you're seeing? Or is this what CA is seeing? Or is this something you see as well?
I think we're at a
You don't have to agree with me.
I think we're in a very interesting time in the industry. To some extent, it's sexy to be back in IT. We spent a lot of time focusing on cost reduction, etc. And with the advent of digital, we're seeing people start to rethink, how do I grow revenue? How do I use these sort of things to really rethink my business? And it's transforming every industry. Accenture sits across 38, 39 industries. I have yet to see an industry that isn't fundamentally affected by this transformation. And I think APIs are at the center. And if I look at retail, and I'll sort of pick out a few. We've seen overseas a lot of people taking a look at the omni-channel experience for shops. They were in a position where a customer would come into their shop, look at the products, and then use their mobile device to comparison price and shop, and actually look for products elsewhere. We haven't seen that as much here in Asia. What we are seeing is, how do I expand my physical space into a much wider agenda? So luxury brands, for example, they need to be in the high street in a very usually expensive location. They can't store all their products in the store, but they want their customers to actually experience the full breadth and make that available. So they're looking at extending the physical store with their virtual footprint and start to create an omni-channel experience. And that's happening here in Asia, which I think is pretty powerful. In the retail space, I think we have a lot of companies that are small and medium enterprises. And if you're generating products, often as soon as it gets delivered to the store, you've lost all contact with what's happening to that product, what's going on. You lose connection points with the customer. And so we're starting to see the advent of APIs and tracking of the products in a retail shop as a way to start to increase visibility about where is my product, how do I actually understand how my customers are using it.
Is that like supply chain, just-in-time supply chain?
So even supply chain is certainly going through that exercise. In this case, I'm actually talking about the challenge where, as a distributor, I go into a retailer and the relationship is now between the customer and the retailer, and I've lost control. I lose visibility. So they want to digitize their entire chain and actually understand that. But in the retail case, there are a lot of distributors that sell multiple products, and so they're trying to make that connection. Loyalty is another interesting example. In China, we had a company that took a look and said, we've got a lot of partners. This was a company in insurance. And if I'm doing general insurance, I might need access to garages, I might need access to repair, I might need access to rental, I might need access to lots of services. And they started realizing that if they could cross-advertise each other's products and make that a digital way to do that, they could actually strengthen their network. And over a few months, they actually built quite a strong ecosystem that they could then use to promote and grow each other within a geography. Yeah, and I've seen the same in Philippines. You know, a strong focus of how do I start to unlock all of these touch points that my customers have and start to get exposure to what's going on in that service. So it's pretty exciting, I think.
We have a very unique one here. In South Korea, a few years ago, I think 2 years ago, we had Tesco enter the market. And Tesco did not enter the market the way, say, Woolworth or Safeway or Carrefour would. What they did was they went to the subways advertised on the walls of the subways, the barcodes and the items you would have on a normal shelf of a supermarket. And my Korean colleagues would have seen that. However, people would go shopping by going to work every morning and seeing a carton of milk or 2 cartons of orange juice.
Scan it
And
with
they would
their
scan
phone.
it,
Yeah.
and it gets debited out of their system. And by the time you get home, or at a predetermined time, you get the groceries delivered. So again, digitizing that, transforming that in a unique way, and how retail is doing it.
Yeah, and that really took advantage of the fact that people had time while they were waiting. You got them where they were working, you actually used the mobile access point, and they were able to create an event around their entry into the market that was pretty powerful. And that was an ecosystem, right? In addition to ordering something,
Yes.
you had to eventually get it delivered to the home and schedule when that was, so all of a sudden, they needed partners in that market. And again, the API model really enabled that, so it's pretty powerful.
It is, it is. Transportation.
Yeah, if I look at transportation, I've looked overseas. Part of my role is to look at digital design globally for Accenture. And a lot of focus around transportation has been on personal vehicles. In Asia, I just don't see it. China is the only one that's generating a lot of.
Expand on that. When you say personal vehicles, talk about that.
So personal vehicles, the automobile that you buy day in, day out. There's been a lot of focus in Europe and North America to actually instrument and use the car as the next connected device and actually start to do things. We did an application where in joint partnership with Mercedes, you get into the car, you could actually order a pizza, it would track your location as you went along the way, and they would literally walk out of the store and deliver it to your car as you were on your way home. I mean, that sort of connection at a personal vehicle level. But in Asia, the cars are manufactured elsewhere.
Yeah, arbitrage.
The model's probably not been as attractive, but if I go to the industrial space, it's a completely different story. So if I take a look at buses, I take a look at taxis, I take a look at public transit, most Asian cities are growing very fast and they're outgrowing the public transit. And one of the things they're trying to figure out is how do I grow the capacity faster? But we had some insight early on. We said, well, yes, it's going to take you time. And you can see in Singapore, they're planning growing Clark Key, 2018, 2020. So they're multi-year plans. We said, what if you could track transportation and travel in your network real time? And I could actually give you advice on an application that told you, if you take this route, it's going to take you 25 minutes. If you take this route, it's going to take you 10. And I use the real-time information and the APIs available to shift people's behavior to better use the infrastructure you already have. And that's a real power for a lot of growing cities because they are actually in a position where they can maximize the use of their existing network while they're waiting for extra capacity.
Totally agree. I have 2 perspectives to this, and I'll give you a user perspective, a question from a user perspective. I already have a vehicle.
Yeah.
I may not have a smart vehicle, but I have one. How do I adapt that vehicle I have, which is probably 5 years old, to partake in the connected vehicle? Is that a backward compatible solution? Is that possible?
Yeah. So it's an interesting
That's the first
question from that perspective because the car manufacturers want you to upgrade your car. We know that you're actually carrying all the connection points in your mobile device with you already. So you're already connected to some extent. And right now there are applications that actually leverage the power of the mobile phone to track location and travel and all that sort of stuff. I can find where my car is in a particular space. So I can participate today because the device is separate from the car. We do see though, there's electronics in the car that's been there now for 15 years that give me insight about how the car's performing. And I can take that and connect in to the cars, even your 5-year-old car, and actually get amazing insight about the performance of the car.
Engine management systems, entertainment systems.
Correct. And now I'm in a position where I can offer you, Vic, I can tune your car to the way you drive so that you get better performance if you like to go pretty fast.
I can't buy the
better
chip.
performance.
Yes.
Right. So it's an interesting way to start to personalize the vehicle, personalize the experience, even in an existing car.
But that's a big market in our part of the geography, where people buy a vehicle and it stays in Singapore for 10 years, in Australia for 15 years, and we still keep going. But you want to invest in a vehicle and keep it modern at the same time being connected. And I think the world of APIs and connected cars, retrofitting technology and applications which are already in the vehicle will get us there.
Yeah. That's why I said APIs are kind of a bridging technology, because I can have a lot of existing infrastructure. If I start to expose some of those capabilities to participate in the API economy, then I can start to bring new life and more extended services to those products.
Couldn't agree more. The second part of my question was, and it's more insight as well as a question. There's an insurance company in Australia. It offers you a cheaper insurance policy.
Pay as you drive.
Correct. You pay as you drive. If I go pick up the kids, go around the block, do shopping a kilometre away, I don't drive on the freeway much, and if I'm not doing that, why should I pay the same premium as someone who's driving, as an example, 200 kilometers a day, going to the airport, to the city, driving the freeway fast in traffic? So why should our insurance premiums be the same? And this company is offering a device which you attach to your vehicle, which I won't be subscribing to in a hurry, but it'll monitor where you go, it'll monitor your speeds. But if you stick to the speed limits and traffic regulations, amount of travel you do every day, you get a cheaper premium.
Yep.
Do you see some of that happening from your side of the business?
I've certainly seen interest in that in Asia. I would say it's not taken off at scale yet. And to me, I'm seeing the same technology being used at the fleet level very effectively in Asia. So if I can track all of my delivery trucks in a go, I can start to understand what's the fuel consumption, what's the driving patterns, where am I having my cars wait, and I can actually start to tune my logistics engine. And I see stronger use for those industrial capabilities than I do necessarily seeing it in the personal space in Asia.
And I used to work a long time ago for a logistics company, and they used to always turn right. And they used to say, if you turn right in, say, the New York Manhattan grid, you would save so many rotations.
Yeah.
There's a story in Australia, if you travel clockwise, you would save more fuel than you would travel anti-clockwise. So it all makes sense. It all comes together. One last question on the car. Manufacturers want to provide telemetry, or want to access telemetry, want to fix your car, tune your car, roadside assistance. What about information leaving the car? Do you see some of that advent of those technologies and APIs and applications coming up?
Yeah, so there are two aspects I'll comment on that. One, Ford, one of the things they did was they took advantage of all the telemetry in their cars to understand how the product's being used in the real world. And they actually feed that back to their designers for the next generation of vehicles. Because now you've got insight about how that product is not in the showroom, but in fact how it's actually used. And they're using that to actually design more effective cars and better tailored cars given actual usage, which I think is powerful. Second thing I'll talk about is in agriculture. Telemetry in tractors for agriculture. A tractor is very expensive in a lot of these parts of the world. That's a heavy expenditure for an asset. So people want to figure out, how do I use it? How do I make it available in a broader sense and get better use of it? So we're seeing an Uber concept around tractors within some rural communities to actually try to capitalize on that.
So I buy one, cooperative farming, I lend it to you.
Yeah, and I will actually monetize that asset while I'm not using it, which is kind of interesting.
The world of APIs.
Yeah, they took another step and they said, well, if I've got the sensors in the tractor, what if I partner with the folks who have sensors in the fields? And I can actually talk using those sensors to the tractor and say, hey, I already have enough fertilizer. Don't spray fertilizer here. And if I do that, I can actually improve the utilization of chemicals and actually improve yield in the farm, largely by making those two connection points. We've done some stuff what we call precision agriculture that's looking at an end-to-end. Is it appropriate to harvest today based on the forecast of the grain prices in the by the time it's going to get to market? Or should you wait 2 days? Is it actually going to make a difference? What's the impact on weather and public APIs to actually improve your farming? If you sense something is wrong, how do you mobilize your farm management to actually go and correct that before it becomes a big problem? So pretty pretty interesting space, I think, around the transportation.
Logistics.
Yeah, so logistics, I think, is an interesting business because the cheapest way to do logistics is to stop moving things, right?
Well, I would say FedEx would be spoken hub.
Yes, and they've taken APIs in a slightly different stance. So in Hong Kong, they actually pulled out an idea that said, what if I could measure the delivery of packages throughout the network? And I put sensors on there that tell you motion, temperature, etc. I can actually start to monetize a different style of a supply chain. When I lived in China, sometimes I'd get wine that was very good, and other times I'd get wine that really tasted bad. And it turned out the guys who were delivering it might well park the truck in the sun for a period of time while they're waiting to unload it. And so the product would actually spoil in transit. Well, FedEx has said, well, if we can track it every step of the way, we can guarantee a certain temperature of your product and make sure what you deliver is actually the quality you expected. So they're starting to monetize the information through the supply chain in a way that I think is pretty powerful. We've seen another, so that's a new revenue source. SingPost sat down and said, we are a logistics company.
We had SingPost here earlier.
Okay.
Just to keep you aware.
And did they talk about the use of, for the startup community, they need a supply chain. Why not rent that as a service from SingPost? So they don't need to build it themselves, they just become part of their ecosystem. They talk
about white labeling and drones, but
okay.
please elaborate.
Yeah, so in this case, Singapore's trying very hard to grow the startup community, but getting your product out and distributed in Asia is quite tough. Why have every startup incur that expense? Why not just make that a managed service and a sellable service?
And off you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a great way to actually drive, I think, new revenue out of existing.
I've seen certain customers or certain products, and I'm talking about shedding lights. Gillette does a very good job of trying to figure out when your last blade runs out. And if they somehow automate that supply chain using RFID, not so much applications, then you cut out going to the store or the pharmaceutical store or the drugstore or the supermarket, and then you get another choice. So you would now get, the only time you change razor blades is when you walk into a store, you see a better one or something different.
Otherwise, it's just delivered.
Otherwise, it's just the same.
Well, that's the move to convert a product to a service. It's a better relationship. It's a longer-term value proposition with your customer, less switching. It's very attractive.
And that's what's happening, not only in pharmaceuticals, but razor blades, consumables, and that's one side. And healthcare.
So healthcare is kind of an interesting challenge because there's a lot of hype and interest around healthcare. I mean, when I do internally, when I talk with an Accenture, if I'm giving a conversation, I ask the question, how many people have a wearable device? And if the age demographic is below about 30, then I get about 2/3 to 3/4 of the room say, yes, I have a wearable.
That's the only reason I'm wearing this.
And it is interesting. If you see the older generation, it's been less so. But that information of having constant knowledge about your movement, about your heart rate, etc., can help you actually start to manage health in a very different way. And we're seeing insurance companies say, what if I tap into that? So we have one insurance company that said, I will give you this device, you will submit this data, and if you're going and doing healthy exercise along the way, etc., just like the pay-as-you-drive construct, this is, I'll give you health insurance premium because you're behaving in the way that's going to improve your health.
Are you referring to the one in Australia?
Not in this case.
Okay.
No.
Because I can talk about a customer of ours, HBI in Western Australia, and they offer get-togethers at parks once every month, and they provide you with a device you can wear, and if you wear it and you monitor yourself, it's not you're going to take 2,000 steps, but you just monitor yourself and upload your data. It's not just them getting the information of how many people are using it, but it keeps the community fitter, better, more aligned, and ready and prepared. There is a toothbrush released at the Mobile World Congress 2 days ago, which actually sees which part of your mouth you're cleaning and which teeth are not being cleaned. And it's got about 16 sensors in the toothbrush. And I saw this person talking about it, and they are pretty much sure you can't do a better job with an
Yeah.
And they are monitoring how many people are using it. And the argument for this was that 75% of the American population already takes their mobile phones into the toilets. So why not tap into that and give an application and now have a connected toothbrush?
Yeah.
And I think it's going a little bit out of control, but that is the modern era.
Yeah, and that's a case where, again, digitizing an industry becomes quite powerful. My biggest question in healthcare is who pays? If I look in North America and Europe, the insurers are actually very motivated to drive the kind of behaviors because it improves the risk profile and therefore improves their ability to manage their costs and their payout. But in Asia, it's actually pretty distributed. The insurers don't quite have that same impact.
We were talking about that a while ago, and in some countries across APJ, we have different demographics. You look at Australia, it's got a national healthcare system, so the government will obviously chip in and sponsor it. You go to Japan and Singapore, and you see more in Japan, less in Singapore, an aging population. They don't want to pay for people not being fit enough and needing care earlier in life. So it's going to be state sponsored in certain cases,
Yeah.
but insurance companies, what about pharmaceutical companies?
So pharmaceutical companies are in an interesting position because they have to educate a lot of the doctors who actually understand their products. They have to understand if I leave information with you, do you read it? Today it's all paper-based. It's all transit-based. It's actually very hard to know, did the doctor understand? They're starting to use exposure to digitize access to that information, start to make the insight about how the products are actually going through the pharmacies more visible, and they're actually then able to better figure out where are the pockets of miseducation or misinformation I need to help solve. So it starts to give them a better way to make decisions. In hospitals, it turns out that one of the most expensive things is the medical equipment in the hospital. And what happens is, when you're in a rush because you have a health crisis, they have to locate that heavy equipment, get it into the environment next to the patient, and actually use it, and then they run off and go do something else, which means they don't know where some of this equipment is in the hospital. So we've seen companies start to use a wearable construct to start to tag and track that equipment. So when I need a equipment that's pretty expensive, I don't have a couple in my hospital, I can find it quickly, and that time may actually be a huge benefit. Or you get people who get lost in a hospital, and they have to go department to department. There was a TED video I watched. A guy put a video camera on his head. He said, I want you to see the experience of going to the hospital. And unfortunately, 75% of the video was him looking at the ceiling because they put him on a chair, on a gurney, and then he was wheeled and weighted space to space to space. And it was a good indication about, well, what's the customer experience, the patient experience you're getting. With the advent of medical tourism, I'm starting to see this start to come into play about rethinking the patient experience. How do you attract people to come to Singapore for those discretionary services
Absolutely.
versus others? So private hospitals are starting to take a look and say, this is actually pretty powerful, how do I take that?
And that's monetizing the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure we're on time. I just want to, you can move the slide, that's okay. But I'll put a punchline in there for an advertising for the security side of the business. Fiona Stanley Hospital in Western Australia was something we proudly automated or digitized a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, from where the supply chain, the doctors coming in, the patients coming in, the car park, payment systems were all electronic digitized applications. And it's a smart hospital, it's one of its kind in Perth, where doctors move from one hospital to the other, and each patient has access to his or her own records, but each doctor has access only to the records of the patient he or she is seeing.
Right.
And the moment you leave the premises, the machines are wiped out, the tablets are wiped out, and that smart hospital concept, even though it's state funded or government funded or state government funded, is on the increase, especially in countries like Singapore and metropolitan hubs like Hong Kong and Tokyo. We'll see more of that, but it will be funded privately.
Yeah.
So please go on, sir.
All right, so a couple more industries I'll highlight. Financial services has been looking at this pretty heavily. You know, they've certainly looked at it from a omni-channel, multi-channel construct. How do I get to a point where one of my customers, if they get stuck trying to fill out an application form online, then and they come into the branch, I want to be able to pick it up exactly where they got stuck, help them get through that, and continue that process in a different channel. So that omni-channel construct means the customer is starting to see the relationship not with the internet or with the branch, but with the organization. And that changes the relationship a bit. So this omni-channel construct is becoming, I think, interesting. We're also seeing a move to say, if I have services I want to provide to my customers, how do I make sure I provide those same services to my relationship managers, to my wealth managers, so that they can actually talk about the same investment opportunities or the same way to run their money, which I think is quite powerful. We have a concept called everyday banking, which is the idea that there are very few people these days that actually wake up going, I can't wait to go to the bank today. They might have a goal that says, I want to move house, not I want to go get a loan. And so the thinking is, if you start to understand that intention, you can start to think about, how do I help them do the research? How do I help them connect with partners of the bank to do moving, to take a look at what the schools are available, and insurance, etc., and start to assemble an ecosystem around the goal of moving house, rather than assembling it around a channel to fill out a loan application. And it's changing the nature of, go after the intention, don't go after the transaction. Because our analysis says less than 5% of the value to the bank is actually in the fees of the transaction. It's more in the early research up front and in the ongoing relationship that you have with that customer. So they're starting to see that, I think, evolution be quite important.
I guarantee you when we do Q&A in a few minutes, a lot of questions come to me across the geography about fintech. And people asking me, when do you see financial technologies come through the banks, possibly do less business for home loans, for example? But my day-to-day grocery shopping, my loyalty card with my gas station, my micropayments under $100, PayPass in Australia, Touch and Go, or whatever it's called elsewhere, Tap and Go. Do you see a lot of those technologies coming in?
Well, absolutely, and it's funny because the bank almost has a choice. Either they're going to become amazing and understand the identity, know your customer, and be amazing at transaction efficiency, or they're actually going to facilitate and participate in the activities your consumers have. A lot of the fintech stuff is saying, services you get at the moment are very transactional. I want to help you provide different services. We have one fintech company that we worked with that said, a lot of small and medium enterprises can't get loans from banks because they don't actually keep track of their financials as well as they could. And the fintech company said, well, what if I can keep track of the cash flow and the payments in the shop and use that as a better indicator of your ability to pay back? If I do that, I can offer you a better loan and better financial services. So there's a high interest in starting to service a different way to reach your customers than just a transactional-based model.
Very true. And the next step you'll see very soon is cross-border Forex. I mean, Forex wars are always on.
Yeah.
The amount of times I lost money changing home loans from one currency to the other, especially in Singapore when I lived here. Cross-border commerce is increasing. People are buying goods made in one country, distributed from another country in a different currency, delivered to a different consumer. And a lot of that is being solved with applications. You see a taxi application there, but I think contactless payments, NFC,
Financial inclusion.
I don't know, the Octopus, the Sweeper card,
Yep.
the Pasco card, the EasyLink,
Yep.
anonymous transactions. And for me, it's like buying a beverage at a 7-Eleven and a pack of cigarettes, where the other person doesn't know I smoke. Being anonymous in a transaction is more important. And the convenience is equally important with no change or loose money coming through.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is we're seeing groups that start to say, are there better alternatives than cash? So in Delhi, we had a client who, the guys who drive those rickshaws are a cash-based business. About 11 o'clock, the robbers would go try to find them because they knew they had a lot of cash. And what they found was if they created a wallet where they could deposit money at a 7-Eleven or wherever they were at along the way, all of a sudden they didn't carry a lot of cash. They were less of a target. So it was more safe for them to move to a digitized payment model. So it was a safety-based play.
There you go.
We've had governments who said, when I take a look at government disbursements, how do I know that the money I'm using for taxpayers is landing in the end recipient? Because there's a lot of middlemen along the process. How do I use a digitized monetary flow to actually make sure more of the money gets to the recipient that I want to do? And that kind of brings up the government question.
And that's one thing I did not cover here because I left that to you. Is I know the questions. We're just going to cover one more sector. Public sector is big, and most of the time I'm not allowed to talk about it because either we're into projects or it's security bound or I'm under NDA, and I don't want people with guns chasing me around. So I'd rather you do it.
All right, fair enough. So as a government, I guess a couple things are standing out. Governments are complicated, and citizens trying to get into governments are often finding it challenging. Where do I start? So we had a case where, Singapore said we want to have a single stop shop for a citizen to get a service. So let's say I see a snake. Who do I call? Do I call the Parks and Recreation area because I'm in a park? Oops, the snake moved over, now it's in the HDP flat, so I gotta go talk to the HDP organization.
Pretty cool.
Oops, it's on the freeway.
In North Queensland, they tell me don't bother calling if you're being bitten by a taipan. No one can help you.
Right, too late.
Too late.
So in this case, the Singapore government said, well, what if I can have one entry point in, and I will track what's going on with the actual activity, and if it needs to be a handover to another agency, I'll do that on your behalf, and then I'll report it back almost as a case management model. And so that was an initiative to simplify the interface between a citizen and the government. We're seeing a push more for sharing between departments within governments as well.
The three-letter agencies?
Yeah. I think a lot of focus is around how do I share more effectively between agencies to do better planning, better growth planning, better forecasting, better financial management, better transparency. So there's a lot of focus around governments of how do I use this digital tech to start to expose services. We had one group, this was in another country, where the government said, I need to get more services available to my citizens, but I don't want to increase my IT budget. So what they did was they exposed their data as APIs, and then they invited the citizens to start to assemble applications that might be useful and let the free market start to provide these services. And they did
That's
things,
monetizing your APIs.
that was fabulous.
In Australia and in Singapore, in Hong Kong and in Japan, we see a lot of people, immigration is the first point where APIs are coming in. Visas are going away, and the electronic visas, even for India, I applied for an e-visa. Very cool. I'm seeing renewal of passports, renewal of driver's licenses. I think earlier my leadership was talking about some wins in Australia. Last quarter, the API management business had a win with Transport New South Wales, and the state of New South Wales, which is the Sydney area, is digitizing driver's licenses. They're digitizing fishing licenses. They're digitizing guns and arms and probationary licenses. And I was reading an article where if you do not have power on your device and you're stopped by a policeman and you can't show them your license, it is okay as long as you can produce that and show it at any police station in 24 hours. The same as a normal license. So digitizing for citizen services, as we would call it, is well underway. From employment passes in Singapore to visas and passports and driver's
Efficiency,
licenses.
compliance.
Ease of use.
Lots of, yeah.
Ease of use. I don't know how many other slides we have because we can keep talking about this till the
Just
sun sets.
So if you have time to open to the floor for questions.
Any questions on security or on API management? More than happy to take them. This is a topic which consumes a lot of time. So I'm scared of you. Your
Why?
question is a little dangerous.
That's okay. You're the security man.
Yes, sir.
So my question is that when you are using all these published APIs, and so you're making all these calls and you're getting all this data, so how do you make sure that those APIs are secure in themselves? What should prevent some malicious people from writing malicious APIs?
APIs are exposed already. I mean, when you create APIs, say for the MRT, a timetable, train timetable, leaves at 18:02, arrives at 18:16 at the next station. The malicious content of that minimal. Trent, have you seen any malicious APIs or any APIs?
Or could they be manipulated to become malicious? I mean,
Well-
that's the question. How do you do security at API?
We began the conversation by saying nothing is 100% secure. But having said that, good thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. If you make your services available to someone, then that obviously becomes a question about how do they use it. Nice thing about API management, you know who's using it, you know how frequently they're using it, you can actually track that. I can actually keep track and make sure that the services I'm providing also have a level of anonymity to the data, for example, that doesn't expose commercial or security risks. So to me, it's less about pure border protection of who's connecting to it and more about, did I design, assuming that this is in the public domain? Do I keep track of usage and know how to monitor that? In some cases, we worked with companies that said, what if we watermark your data? So you know when that data goes somewhere, we can actually track it. So even though it's available via public API, I can start to actually track utilization and usage of that. There's a lot of things that go into the design process to make sure that your APIs are actually appropriately used. But yes, people can spin up and do different things. I've seen very few, what I would say is public APIs that are really hiding behind some pretty malicious stuff. Usually you can tell from the source and the aggregation of those APIs whether that source is trustworthy or not. The marketplaces are interesting. I don't know if you've seen the programmable web, for example. That's actually got a collection of publicly available APIs. There are thousands and thousands. Those are vetted, and they're also vetted by a community, so that the community who consume it can say trustworthy, not trustworthy, etc. And the idea is use a bit of self-policing rather than a central management. Lots of strategies we're seeing to try to manage it, but you're right, it's a real problem.
Thank you.
Real problem to design around.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
In the
So-
interest of time, I want to ask just one question to Trent because I promised I would. Because I sometimes wonder what's going to happen. What do you see in the future, Trent? We're talking APIs today. What do you think the thinking is tomorrow? What are you thinking?
Well, when I sit down and think about APIs, we spend a lot of time focusing on single organizations making services available in some shape or form. I think we're going to see an explosion in the ecosystem play, which is I'm going to take a look and say, why do I need to build this service if I can consume it available elsewhere? Let me get my own organization to focus on my core competency and focus on the value there and participate in an ecosystem. I think that's going to unlock a lot of the talent and a lot of the small players to participate and compete with some of the large players. So we look at that as an opportunity to disrupt, from very small players. It levels the playing field. And I think we're going to see an acceleration of those services and some pretty creative services. Could be coming out of a small hackathon, or it could be coming out of a very large organization. We do a tech vision every couple of years, and we realized early on that this actually levels the playing field for lots of organizations. But large organizations are using digital to say, I have better reach, better understanding of the customers, better market presence, better brand. I can use the same technologies to strengthen it. So what it means is you've actually not only leveled the playing field, but you've also strengthened some of the players. And so I think we're in for some very interesting cross-industry plays.
And this is just the beginning. And just to end the note, thank you so much, sir. We run API academies and hackathons across the geography. Today it's in Korea, it's going to be in Australia, it's going to be in Hong Kong. We do this on a regular basis, not to sell product, not to talk about the CA API management, but educate communities of developers to understand coding and developing and
And unlock
using
the value.
Unlock the value, monetize the API.
We had a very interesting case where a company had some problems they needed to solve, and they wanted to use a hackathon to try to tap into the community to get some new ideas. And they ran a contest to do that. The folks who won were actually employees of that company that had never had an opportunity to bring those ideas to management. And it actually, they got some of the talent inside their own organization. So it's not only externally, it also can unlock the value internally.
No, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you for the time.
Thanks.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions or anything you need, you've got the media team here, Molly, we'll